everyone, and welcome to Fleet's, well, I would say welcome to Fleet's Random Ramblings, but, well, it's not quite Fleet's Random Ramblings, it's Fleet's Catchup Ramblings, and my computer is for some reason shitting a brick. Please stop shitting a brick. Thank you. Thank you for resuming normal operations. For a second there, I thought we weren't going to get there, but we did. Hello! Staticky Fleet in the background. Good times, good times. Boop! Push that button. And push that button. There we go. Jolly good. Right. Okie dokie. Hello, Timu. Nice to see you. Brilliant. Right, so as you all know, normal drill, catch-up ramblings. Work through whatever backlog of questions there are. And then we wrap up for the evening. Or when we get to 3 hours, whichever comes first. Whichever one of those it may or may not be. So we'll just have to have a look and see where we get to. So as far as I'm aware, okay, so we managed to get through. Yep, so we got through all of those, so that's fine. So the only thing we have to get through is any of the Discord questions that we didn't get to on Monday that were asked prior to... When did I start Ramblings? It's 3 hours, so it's within that 3-hour section. So it'd be... When did I start? Okay, so yeah, so make sure... No, so yeah, so before 8 o'clock. Right, okay. So I know which ones I roughly answered, but there's a few from the gunnery officer that we need to work through. But, without further ado, let me actually get on with that. So, thoughts on the Sangamon class CVE? Do you think the USM built too few of them, since they're as large as the later Commencement Bay class? Why didn't they build more Sangamons? Do you think the Ruler class CVE is a better design than the Sangamon? No, because the Sangamons, well, the Ruler and the Sangamons are... Let me just check real quick. Hello, Moe.
Hey.
Okay, so let me have a look. So the...
Alright. Well, it's simple as this.
Oh,
The Commencement Bay is still a properly designed from the ground up.
Yeah, the Sangamons were based on the T3s, but they were built up, and the Rulers, I believe, were just the UK versions of the Sangamons, I think.
No, they're the UK version of the Bulls, right?
Not sure. That's what I'm just trying to find out. I'm just trying to make sure I get my facts right before I open my mouth.
It should be. It should be the for the Bulls, not the Sangamons. They only built 4.
Yeah, so the Sangamons were basically built on Cimarron class oilers that were no longer required. They were fairly quick for escort carriers, breaking 18 knots. Whereas most escort carriers could barely break 70, so you've got an extra knot of speed there. And they were decently heavily armed. The thing you've got though is that, to be honest, yeah, of course the Sangamons are going to be better than the Rulers because they're just better ships. The Rulers are definitely not better ships than the Sangamons at all. No, absolutely not.
Yeah,
The
so
USN didn't build too few of them. They converted what hulls they had to the design they worked up for those hulls. And once those hulls ran out, they didn't bother building any more because there weren't the spare hulls to use. They focused on building other escort carriers. Basically. Thoughts on torpedo nets or torpedo netting as torpedo defense for ships? Do you think it's not an effective torpedo defense, unlike torpedo bulges? Torpedo nets and torpedo netting is purely something used in a harbor. They are deployed when you are tied up or in an anchorage. And there's a reason they fall out of fashion. Because why would you have all that infrastructure when you can instead have a torpedo defense system on the hull that works whether you're sitting still or moving? It was an effective enough defense, it's just that one's hull-mounted measures were as effective at preventing torpedo damage. Then at that point, that protects against damage whether you're moving, stationary. You don't have to deploy it or rig it. It just makes more sense. Typical gunnery officer, what was the thought process on the submarine-launched IDAS? Do you think it's a viable SAM system for submarines to shoot down ASW aircraft while submerged? How would you guide or direct the missile to a target while submerged? What is this system? I've never heard of this. Oh, it's a new system. It's a new system, so we know very little about it. If you want the honest answer, I'd just say my honest answer would be at this point, I have no idea if it's viable or not. Simply down to the fact that it's a brand new weapon system, which we know very little about. It's not been used in combat. I have no idea how they are going to guide and direct it. Hello, Morale. Hello, Stephen. Hello, Mark. Thoughts on the French anti-aircraft missile, the Matra R530? Do you think it's better than the Sparrow and the Sidewinder, the 1960s variant? Well, first of all, you can't put the Sparrow and the Sidewinder in the same comparison. One is a long-range radar-guided missile. One is a short-range infrared missile. They are two entirely separate missiles that do entirely separate jobs. One is for longer-range engagements. One is for shorter-range engagements. You can't really put them in the same comparison. Now the Matra R530.
that's the big one.
French medium to short range air-to-air missile. 1.5 to 20 kilometers, Mach 2.5, two-stage solid rocket boosters. From what I understand, it achieved it's basically your standard air-to-air missile for the early period of that platform's existence. Has potential, but also has chronic difficulties with its use that would need a good decade to overcome. What was the thought process on the US fitting turbo-electric drive on some of their standard battleships? What was the reason US fast battleships weren't fitted with turbo-electric drive, unlike the standard predecessors? Turbo-electric drive is a way to get efficiency out of steam turbines without having to use geared turbines. Geared turbines took a while to proliferate as a drivetrain for warships. And the US was instead looking at turbo-electric. As soon as reliable geared turbines proliferated during the interwar period, the weight savings that geared turbines give compared to turbo-electric are just so incredible that you would be detrimentally affecting the performance and weight of your battleships by fitting them with turboelectric when geared turbines are an option. Thoughts on the BMPT Terminator and why didn't we see them anymore in Ukraine? Do you think its role as tank escort or as a light tank of the Russian army does not produce the really results they wanted? Which AFE would constitute a tank escort? There's no such thing as a tank escort. It's the other way around. Tanks escort other AFVs, and then tanks are escorted by infantry. They all work together. There's no such thing as a dedicated tank escort. First of all, it's not a tank escort, nor is it a light tank. It's a vehicle designed specifically for urban assault or assault on heavily fortified positions. That's its whole role. The reason why we don't see them anymore in Ukraine is, well, we've seen a little bit of them as they've gone on, but bear in mind, there are only 30 of them. In the whole Russian army, there are only 30 of these things. It is not a common vehicle at all.
There are other priorities for the Russians to build.
Like, that Terminator uses a very valuable tank hull that you could build a T-72 out of. Or a T-90 out of. So, and the Russians need tanks more than they need BMPTs. Thoughts on the Japanese pre-war naval program, Circle 1 until Circle 4, and do you think it's too little and too late before the outbreak of war between US, Britain and Australia? Do you think they're trying to circumvent the naval treaties with these 4 programs? No, they're just trying to outright ignore the fact the treaties exist and build the navy they want. Bear in mind, naval strategy is build strategy. Always has been. The Japanese might know they're going to war, but they have to plan and they have to build as though they're not. You plan to fight a war with the navy you have, but you're always building towards your ideal, regardless of the tensions. Naval building programs, all nations will usually have a naval building program ongoing to move their fleet to where they want it to be at the outbreak of any major war. We've seen it throughout all of industrial history. It's not something that Japan suffers from. The British had it as well. The Americans had it. The Italians had it. The Germans had it. The French had it. That's just the way it is. Why didn't the British try out the 76 Sherman turret for the 17-pounder and eventually for the Firefly, since the 76 turret is larger than the 75 turret the Firefly used and modified? Because we're British, and we did British things, because that's what we do.
No, they actually tried it. You need substantial modification for it on the T-23 turret to fit the 17-pounder. It's mostly just... Hey.
Hello, Phoenix. Hello, Cyclic.
So, something Firefly, something 17-pounder?
It's basically why didn't the British use the 76 Sherman turret for the 17-pounder rather than
because they had the 17-pounder already in their army.
No. It's not the gun. Why didn't they use the turret that the 76 is mounted in by the Americans for the Firefly?
It wasn't developed yet. It literally wasn't developed yet. Like, the development of that turret specifically comes from the US not being happy with how that gun fits in the original M4 turret. The British Army just flatly didn't care and wanted the gun in the original turret and just to make it work because they wanted it ASAP. Armor Force in the US was very, very, very picky about ergonomics. And the fightability of their tanks. And if you've ever seen the arrangement of a 17-pounder inside the turret in a Firefly, and how the gunner has to like have their arms for traverse and elevation, it's the 76 wasn't quite that bad, but it was close in the original M4 turret. And Armor Force took one look at this and went, "No,
Yeah, basically.
that's not a fightable tank."
Mm-hmm.
And decided to wait longer. And to be honest, it really didn't affect. It wasn't the factor that affected the 76 millimeter armed. Well, 76 in air quotes. They're really a 75 millimeter gun, but they
I know.
changed the name for ammunition reasons.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the thing that affected the tanks not being available in Normandy in numbers initially. What affected, they had the tanks there. What affected that was the ground force commanders not wanting the extra logistical strain during the invasion. But the tanks were in the UK, so it's not. But regardless, when the Brits made the decision to put the 17 pounder in the Sherman, that turret was not available.
Yep. So you had the option was modify it or don't. Well, there was a third option.
Or attempt to create your own turret, which they don't have the. Like, they could, but they also couldn't.
There was
They
also
technically could have, but they didn't have all the tooling and stuff like that, so they would have had to stand all that up, and they never would have gotten it in, so they just had to go do it.
Yeah. Then of course, well, there is always the cursed option not taken of building a casemate tank destroyer, but that was never going to happen.
I mean, this was Firefly acted less of a tank destroyer than it did a tank.
No, I know. That's
it was a tank unit.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Their desire was for a tank with a 17 pounder, not a 17 pounder armed tank destroyer. Hence why the casemate idea was never going to go anywhere.
In the US terminology, they already had those.
Yeah.
They were the Toad 17 pounder guns.
Mm-hmm.
And I think technically the British did modify some of their M10s.
Yeah,
the Achilles.
Achilles.
Which is a lot better fit for a gun that size.
Mm-hmm. The Achilles did some good work during the war. So, thoughts on the Komar and Osa class fast attack boats? What would happen if the Soviets supplied North Vietnam in the early 60s, before 1964, with these fast attack boats, and also the Soviets provided them with anti-ship missiles? Would the US in 1964 onwards suffer ship losses off the coast of Vietnam? Would the US conduct raids to destroy these boats preemptively before their ships could just come near the Vietnamese coast? To answer the questions in order of asking, the Komar and the Osa class were a very novel way to massively increase the striking power available to small navies aligned to or friendly with the Russians. The Komars came first with a pair of missiles, with a pair of sticks. The Osas came second. They basically, all they basically are, is a boat with a big engine that goes fast and four missiles on them.
Fleet.
Yes?
They weren't that. They were literally torpedo boat replacements, like World War II torpedo boat replacements.
I know.
The Komars are literally built off of a torpedo boat.
I know that. That doesn't mean
the T6.
It still doesn't mean that they weren't an effective way to give striking power to
But that was not the
navies.
intent at all. That was not the intent at all. The Soviet Union was the primary user.
Oh, no, I'm aware. I'm just saying that, given the...
The question says if they were given to the North Vietnamese.
And I was going off of that. Basically, I was building
the
towards...
the first part was thoughts on them, and I'm just correcting some of those thoughts right now.
Fair enough.
Before we get there, the reason the Soviets used so much of them outside of like the Baltic missile boat bashes and torpedo boat bashes that would have occurred, because I think that all is fairly intuitive, is between the OSAs, the torpedo boats, and the various older, tiny gun ASW frigates that the Soviets had.
Mm-hmm.
Those were their primary fjord clearing forces. to deal with Norwegian fast attack craft and submarines in in the waters of the fjords, which are not shallow. It's not shallow water ASW, but it is still confined water ASW. Those fjords can get very deep.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the big roles of the Soviet Northern Fleet, like, yeah, everybody knows the overarching roles, right? You're protecting the approaches to the Soviet homeland on the northern flank.
Mm-hmm.
But in order to do that, they have to at least neutralize and preferably then turn the air bases on in and around northern Norway to their own uses. And to do that, they need to have a ground advance. Well, it's a ground advance with an unprotected flank on the sea. So what you can do, and there's a great chapter in On Contested Shores. It's, by the way, On Contested Shores. The PDF version is free. U.S. Marine Corps University Press. But there is a great, can't remember if it's Red Tide Over the Shore or whatever the name of it is, but there's a chapter specifically focused on Soviet and Russian landing/naval assault, or naval descent. But
Mm-hmm.
those missile boats are vital for action in and around the fjords from the Soviet perspectives. Now, getting to Vietnam, they'd be a problem, but at the same time, what it means is that your Gearing Fram cans can't approach unescorted, right? The U.S. Navy still has plenty of Terrier-equipped assets and Tartar-equipped assets. Are they really well optimized for engaging sticks? Not particularly. But they probably can. And sticks isn't that far off of a conventional low-flying aircraft as well. So as long as you're not caught off guard, which historically every ship sunk by anti-ship missiles, at least to my knowledge, actually has been caught off guard with their pants down. You're probably fine. Now, I would not want to be in a Fram can having to use 5-inch 38s to try to shoot down a Styx. I don't think that's very viable. But if you got a Charles Adams with you, as long as it's not too big of a raid. But, as for the U.S. response is going to be to try to destroy these boats on the piers. Because any sane person is going to try to sink your your enemy's naval assets when you have that kind of a force disparity, right? Before they can come out and threaten you. Styx only has like that version of Styx in that period, I think, only has like a 20 to 26 mile, maybe 27 mile range. That's not, for reference, that's not too far off of the highest two Terrier directors on Long Beach's radar horizon, by the way. So Long Beach can actually be firing back. Now, this is Long Beach herself. She's got the highest in the fleet. Outside of maybe one carrier that had them. But that's sort of the realm you're talking about. It also depends. Like, are we talking about them getting this in the 60s, or are we talking about them getting this in the 70s? Because if it's in the 70s,
it says 60. It says 60s before specifically before 1964.
Well, then they're getting crumped as the U.S. comes into the war.
Crump. Just crump. Just send in some aircraft. Job done. You don't need to risk naval vessels to do it.
Yeah, you send a strike package in and you get them. You come in with Zunis.
Mm-hmm. Good night. Thank you. Oh, what's that? All your nice, friendly missile boats are gone. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you planning on using them? Sorry, didn't realize.
People really, really underestimate what carrier aviation does to missile boats.
It makes them go away.
Oh, by the way, we have Richelieu in the channel here. I don't know if we want to bring him up.
In case we get any shell-related questions, or naval gun or armor-related questions.
We have a resident expert, so.
While we're deciding that, brief survey of the panel. When was the last large-scale amphibious... Phoenix, you're not allowed to answer this.
Okay.
When was the last large-scale amphibious assault conducted? Large-scale being larger than a brigade.
Larger than a brigade.
Mm-hmm.
Are we talking brigade in the western sense or brigade in the eastern sense?
They're the same.
Are we talking
Not
during
sure.
an... I assume we're talking during an actual conflict, right?
Yeah.
The Russians were going to in Ukraine, but never got round
No,
to it.
those were battalion scale.
Really?
Battalion tactical groups. Yep.
Okay. It's going to be the Second World War, isn't it? No, sorry, Incheon. It's going to be Incheon. I'm thinking Incheon.
I said larger than brigade.
Incheon wasn't
Incheon,
large.
Like
Incheon's a
Panama.
freaking core. But
isn't
yeah,
it like Panama
there's
or
other
Grenada?
ones. No, not those two. I see somebody's guessed the Falklands. That's not the most recent one. And the Falklands was multi-brigade, so it would count, but it's not the most recent.
I'm sorry. I'm drawing blanks.
It was not Iraq. Although the commander did take part in the invasion of Iraq before or after this.
Wait a minute. It's Grenada.
An invasion of Iraq in 2003.
What?
So that's not the case, but I'm saying that's a conflict. The commander of this assault commanded the same unit, by the way.
Is it not Grenada?
It's not Grenada.
It's not.
So the commander of this operation commanded the same division in the 2003 invasion of Iraq. That's a huge hint.
I'm sorry. No, I'm just, my brain is just, nope, I ain't got a clue. I ain't got a fucking
2001 1st Marine Division's assault into Afghanistan from the Indian Ocean.
That, I ain't got
General Mattis conducted an amphibious assault via helicopter with his entire division from the sea. Which is like the biggest check mark for U.S. Marine amphibious doctrine since the 1950s, by the way.
Damn.
It's, I think, still the longest, also the longest distance air assault in history as well.
Wow. Goddamn.
For helicopters.
Waka waka waka.
Yeah, and did it with frogs.
Damn.
46s.
Damn.
They had to conduct, so it was a two-stage assault. They conducted a air assault onto a Pakistani airfield, not military controlled or anything like that. Secured it. Did not have permission for Pakistan to do this, by the way. So they did it under combat conditions in case the Pakistanis decided to attack them.
Wow, that was just
refueled their helicopters there, and then lifted the whole division off again, and springboarded from there into Afghanistan.
Oh my god!
Into Helmand province, and the Taliban had no idea what hit them because they were not expecting Helmand to come under attack that early.
Oh my god.
let alone by a full U.S. Marine Corps
What
division.
did Pakistan just go? We're not gonna. Did Pakistan? I assume Pakistan made a lot of protests, but didn't do anything
No,
because they.
Pakistan just probably by the time they realized what was going on, First Marine Division wasn't there. By the way, this was under the command of General Jim Mattis.
Oh god, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
And I'm sure after once Pakistan realized what happened, they were like, it was a whole big old statement of I'm not taking that one.
Yes, like, nope,
Backs away.
no.
Backs away.
But basically, did they break anything? No. Did they kill anybody? No. Okay, we'll grumble publicly, but we ain't doing anything else.
It wasn't a Mew. It wasn't. It was more than a Mew. Gunnery officer. They might have used a Mew to secure the airfield. I'm not sure, but
okay. So, typical gunnery officer asks, thoughts on the Astaros 2 MLRS? Do you think it's a better MLRS system than the HIMARS in terms of accuracy, reliability, firepower, and range of the missiles? No.
With these better, hang on.
HIMARS.
I gotta look this one up.
Yeah, I have. Astero is an older system. It has a capable range of missiles, but I would still maintain HIMARS is better overall. It's basically a rough, and I mean very rough, Brazilian domestic equivalent to something like HIMARS. Similar sort of flexibility, similar sort of varying missile packs you can put in the launchers. Can fire everything from unguided dumb rockets all the way up to cruise missiles and anti-ship missiles. It's a system with equivalent capability, but it lacks some of HIMARS' more unique features. So, for example, it can't fire theater ballistic missiles like ATACMS that HIMARS can.
I'm pretty sure ATACMS isn't a theater ballistic missile.
I thought that was one of...
Looking at the definitions, I guess it falls into that category. I'm used to hearing it referred to as a tactical ballistic missile. But yes, it does fall into that category.
Damn, Fleet actually knew something. Fuck. I'll see myself out before I break the universe.
So HIMARS technically could as well, gunnery officer.
HIMARS is also a newer system.
And yes and no. HIMARS is just a road mobile single pack version of
The M270.
the not M270, but of the MLRS, the US MLRS system. There's really nothing too special about HIMARS other than it's lighter and more operationally mobile because it's its own truck. You don't need to put it on a tank transporter.
I mean, I suppose.
However, you sacrifice a lot of tactical mobility with it.
Yeah.
Because of that.
I suppose the thing with the problem you have with the Asterios is that it can only use the platform is not compatible with standard NATO, the whole standard MLRS system.
There really isn't a NATO standard.
No, that's why I changed. That's why I stopped myself. I stopped myself. I said MLRS system that the US came up with. So
really nothing else out there besides what the South Koreans have is.
Yeah. I mean, it's a capable system, but there are something, like I say, but I still think that I think basically it's more comparable to a wheeled version of the M270 because it has a similar sort of reach out and touch things range, and it carries.
Fleet. What did I just say about HIMARS and M270?
No, but the reason I say M270 is because Asterios has 2 packs for weapons. HIMARS
that
only
has
has
nothing
1.
to do with range.
I don't always speak perfectly all the time, all right? Occasionally I don't quite say what I mean.
Also, I would note, that the French do have their own HIMARS equivalent, they're working on Euro Plus, which is supposed to be.
but they're working on it. They're not. Is it an active service at all?
I don't believe so.
Did we ever decide if Richelieu was getting?
Oh
brought
yes,
up
we
in
did.
voice?
Are they there? Ah, good. Yes,
Yeah.
they are there. Oh, okay, yep. I said I'd bring them up whenever they were here, and they are here. So up they come.
Hello.
Hello there.
General Kenobi. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Rules of the internet had to be done. So very
You
quickly.
didn't. You didn't have the customary amount of coughing.
Oh, I knew I'd forgotten something. Ah well. Next question. Like I said, I think with Asteros 2 versus HIMARS, it's not the platforms themselves that matter. It's the weapons they fire.
Well, that and their fire control systems, but
Yeah. Next question. Thoughts on the Army Utility Tactical Aircraft Transport System? That's a mouthful. Um, that resulted in the UH-60 Blackhawk and why did the competition to the Blackhawk, the Boeing YUH-61, failed? Well, I'm looking at one of them and I'm looking at the other one and I'm seeing one sleek, well-rounded, decent-looking tactical helicopter, and then I'm seeing whatever the fuck Boeing built.
so the funny thing is the airframes are very, very similar. It's just one you're more used to. There's nothing particularly wrong with the look of the Boeing one as a helicopter. It's actually a little bit more similar to the Huey in terms of looks, but again, it's the U.S. Army and the U.S. military, right? The looks don't really matter. Let me put a comparison image here between the prototypes and
I've got it. I actually have it up. I'll just
I'm
put it in.
already loaded.
Damn.
Here.
He is already loaded, man. This guy, he has.
But I'd have to dig into the program to tell you, and to be honest, this isn't the time for that. But I mean, of course, the U.S. Army had to launch a program like this. The step up between these aircraft and the Huey of the period is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And with what the U.S. Army was looking at wanting to do, they needed a much more capable helicopter. And what I will say about the Black Hawk is it has an excellent crash survivability record. This is not true for the Huey.
Yeah.
The more modern Hueys are much better, but it's uncommon when it's an uncommon event when you have a Black Hawk crash and everybody in the helicopter dies. Most of the time, most of the people on board live.
Mm-hmm.
Which, when you're talking about a helicopter crash, is
impressive.
Huh.
So, this is actually a fairly interesting question, and I have been looking forward to this one ever since I saw it on Monday, and I'm actually glad Cycling and Phoenix are here. What was the thought process on having both the A37 and the OV-10 Bronco in service at the same time, since their role is almost similar for the 1960s to 70s as coin aircraft?
The OV-10 was much more of a airborne forward air control platform. Like, yes, they could do their own strikes, but typically what they were doing was directing other aircraft on target. And the A37 Dragonfly was much more of a, man, the Sky Raider's getting really old. We need something new from the U.S. Air Force's perspective. And well, that's what they decided on. it didn't have any utility outside of that realm, and it really wasn't useful in areas that hadn't been largely sanitized or for pilot rescue role. The aircraft that would follow on from that in those sorts of roles was actually the A-10. Like, the A-10 was primarily initiated as a program to truly replace the Skyraider in the pilot rescue support role, and the coin role. It really wasn't ever initially intended on being this tank busting close air support over Europe aircraft, because it was going to die in that role. I don't care how much of a titanium bathtub you put around the pilot. It does nothing to help protect the aircraft from Buk and Kub, Strela, Osa. Like, it just does nothing. And for the most part in this period, for the most part of A-10's period, you're really not talking about them doing tank plinking with Mavericks. They're flying in with cluster bombs close over enemy formations in Europe. But rant about the A-10 aside.
Oh, it wouldn't be a discussion about Cold War close air support aircraft without the obligatory cyclic rant about the A-10. It's a tradition.
But this is for that similar sort of pilot rescue role or support of special forces, that the OA-37 did, and took over from the Skyraider. But I mean, that's the aircraft had different roles. So the Bronco and the Dragon, Dragonfly, I think was the name of it. Actually.
Yeah, Dragonfly.
Yeah, those two aircraft had different roles. Commonly conflated, but different.
Mm-hmm. Would you call the Striker MGS a failure in both design and service, just like the failure with the M551 Sheridan?
Didn't we answer this the last time I was here?
No, we answered the question on why the
Sheridan.
Sheridan.
Oh, no, that's right. That's right. Delta handled this in text the last time I was here. That's what it was. No, I wouldn't. Because the Sheridan, quite frankly, when you ask the people that actually served with them outside of Vietnam, they never had any problems with them. The electronic issues got fixed largely by moving away from Shillelagh, because Shillelagh was a bad missile. And transitioning the Sheridan towards being an assault gun. Like, the Sheridan was designed as a light tank. It could be used as a light tank in certain roles. The Striker MGS is literally designed as an assault gun in the same way that the M10 Booker is. It's literally the same mission set. The only difference between it and the M10 Booker is, hey, the M10 Booker has tracks. Obviously, there's technical differences here, but Striker MGS suffered a lot from the needs to fit inside the A10 brainlet. I would consider that a fault of the M10 Booker, by the way. Striker MGS suffered a lot from the requirement to fit inside of a C-130. And there's reasons that does not make much sense, particularly with how much the just Striker writ large in C-130. Doesn't make sense because of the range reduction in C-130s and all of that. And the Army didn't think about that, and the Air Force was like, "What are you doing?" But whatever. The
All I can imagine is just an Air Force colonel just sat there going, "What are you doing over there?"
Why do you want to reduce the range of the C-130 to like 500 miles?
I don't know. We haven't thought about that yet.
Anyways,
Oh dear.
Striker MGS probably. I don't want to say that. Striker MGS suffered from its autoloader. That autoloader had a lot of technical problems with it. It suffered from. Oh, if Moo's available to jump in here. It suffered from an ammunition type problem. It was trying to do too much with it had too few rounds and too many needs for separate rounds. And like Moo points out here, that autoloader wasn't designed to be put in a Striker.
Yeah. That's about right. What's the next one? Next question is... Why didn't the Army look for a cheaper and smaller helicopter for their OH-58 Kiowa replacement instead of relying on the bigger and more expensive AH-64E to replace the Kiowas as observation and artillery spotter? Why didn't they push the Arapaho into service? I have never heard of that.
So the broad reason why is the Apaches didn't replace the Kiowa's roles. They were in those formations already. From a practical perspective, not like organizationally formations. Those units got task organized constantly together. Like there's this general view that the Apaches were the attack guys and the Kiowas were the recon guys. They never operated unteamed. And so, by the way, Moo, let us know if you want to come up in.
I'm not. You'll have to say if he wants to come up because I'm currently up with the questions.
I can handle it. Moo's in the office at the moment. So with them constantly operating together, what you have is the drones take the role of the spotter and the designator, if you're not talking radar guided. The reason the Army did not go for the more advanced follow-on Kiowa derivatives is budget cuts. Remember, the global war on terror was also a period of reduction in force and reduction of budgets.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't more money to SOCOM brainlet. It was less money to everybody.
I'd like to be allowed a tiny bit of grace period for this next question to give my answer to it before Cycling explains why.
Before I beat you into the ground.
No, before you agree with me. Question 25. Do you think CDART would be on par with SM-2MR if it had a better missile launcher? What if CDART used the US Mark 13 or Mark 26 missile launchers for the Type 42 class? Do you think it would increase the capability of the DG significantly? 1 second. You are not seriously comparing SM-2MR with the fucking CDART.
Fleet, I'm not going to agree with you.
CDART is not on par with SM-2MR.
what version of SM2MR, because CDART comes out a lot earlier, and
This is what I mean. It's
like,
not even close. It's like comparing chalk and cheese.
it's a lot closer than you would think for the earlier SM2s.
Even if you go with the earliest version, Block 1.
Like Block 1. Yeah.
It's not... Even if you put it in a VLS or on an American Mark 42 launcher, it's still not really...
So, I'm not calling it comparable. I'm saying it's a lot closer than you think. And the reason I am saying that comes down to CDART having a ramjet. CDART never has time sharing, so that's its biggest weakness. But if you're not thinking about those soft factors, it's actually pretty close. Now, time sharing and flyout data link and lofting is huge for SM2, and the Seeker is better. But it's a lot closer than you would think.
Problem is, you're always the one saying you have to consider everything. You can't just go with...
Yes. And I would agree. However, it doesn't make it as laughable as you were implying. I would still take SM2 MR Block 1 any day of the week.
It's just to me like comparing like even the... It's just like one platform can be linked with Aegis from a Ticonderoga and could basically not quite...
Not SM2. That's Aegis and NTU.
I thought SM2MR went on with...
It's part of that, but it's not what solely enables it.
I suppose, but it's more... I suppose...
Because there are SM2 equipped ships. There were SM2 equipped ships that never got NTU'd.
Okay,
Or there
so
were ships that got SM2 before they got NTU'd.
So I suppose the question would be, to bring this back to basic thing, if you... Let's say we have two identical Tychos, right? Let's bring this to bare nub. One's got SM2MR with NTU. One's got a hypothetical version of CDART that has the... What did you call it? The things you said that put SM2 ahead? The loft and...
Time sharing,
Yeah.
which evidently CDART does get that in some iterations in 1989, but it doesn't, as far as I'm aware, it doesn't get the loft. But it gets time sharing. Who just messaged me? Oh, well, I'll get back to... Oh, it could loft. Okay.
So at that point...
Moo is checking right now to see if the Royal Navy ever fielded the time sharing version.
Yeah, because at that point, if we're talking about this later version of CDART, at that point, I
will say by 1989, Block 1 SM2 is not the...
the equivalent.
Yeah.
At that point, you're talking about...
You're talking about Block 2, which dramatically improved... Or not Block 2, that's VLS. There's some pretty dramatic improvements that come in for the trainable launcher ones, as well as obviously for the...
And at that point, you are basically talking about the capability gap yawning open.
Yeah. CDART never got anywhere near as much of upgrades as the standard missile series.
Mm-hmm.
It's
nice to
it's kind of comparable to RIM 66E, which is sort of the final form of Block 1 of SM1. Yeah, I just corrected myself, of SM1, but that is the post Falklands upgrades to Rim 66 is comparable to that, or to Sea Dart is comparable to Rim 66 Echo. It has greater range than Rim 66B, but it suffers from some other problems. Rim 66B being the predominant form of SM1 for most of the Cold War. Rim 66E was deployed on all of the non-NTU'd, eventually on all of the non-NTU'd Tartar ships, plus the OHPs.
And lots of other Allied Navy ships as
Yeah.
well, when you think about other SM-1M ships. Because it was essentially the standard missile of basically any nation allied to the United States that had DDGs, whether it was NATO or Japan or Australia. The SM-1MR was really obviously transitioning first from Tartar to SM-1MR, but
Right, so I'm just trying to think. I will admit, Cyclic was right. I was wrong. It's actually nice to be surprised that British missiles weren't, well, you know, there's the whole thing where...
Before you go too far with that statement,
I wasn't going to.
the launcher for Sea Dart really does ruin it.
So I suppose the question...
the moment you start dealing with Soviet missiles that perform evasive maneuvers,
you're in trouble.
Sea Dart really starts struggling because you can't skid to turn. You have to, you cannot pull. Well, I guess you're still skid to turning with the way that ramjet is designed, but you can't pull hard.
Yeah, makes sense.
Because you will starve your engine out.
Yeah. So I suppose in that case the question is actually right. If they'd have used Mark 13 or Mark 26 missile launcher for the Type 42 to handle Sea Dart, somehow adapted, I think it would probably have increased the capability of the DDGs.
It would have, but let's put it this way. By the 1970s, it needs to be replaced.
Rather than kept going and going and going like it was.
Yes. The Royal Navy had some very interesting stuff out there. Seawolf, for reference, was a very good point defense system. Well, not in the sextuple trainable launcher, but there were a lot of early proposals for VLS Seawolf. There was a Seawolf prototype, and I'm reading off here for what Moo is saying right now. There's a Seawolf prototype that was shot out of a VLS in the 60s.
Damn. That's... Talk about getting in the VLS game early. Do we need to do any more on this, or can we wrap this up and move forwards?
I think we can wrap this up.
Right, your typical gunnery officer asks, what was the reason why the M1 Grizzly combat engineering vehicle was cancelled? Do you think they made the wrong decision since the US introduced the M1150 assault breacher vehicle in 2009, also based on the Abrams chassis?
No, I don't.
Because I was going to say, there are still an awful lot of M60 chassis around.
Because the Grizzly is designed to handle several other roles that are handled by honestly better handled by other vehicles. And to be honest, the assault breacher vehicle is specifically focused around being an assault breacher vehicle.
Oh my goodness.
Rather than being a multiple... and it looks terrifying, by the way, with its mind blades on.
Oh my god, that is just... That's the most menacing fucking armored vehicle without a gun I have ever seen. Like, holy shit! Fucking hell. That's terrifying. Fucking hell.
But yeah, no, the Grizzly wouldn't be as anywhere near as good in the role, because it's trying to do other things too. Um,
So did that. So we did that. We did that. Did that. Did that. Did that.
and Fleet, here's the assault breacher vehicle.
Oh no, I've seen it. I looked it up.
Yeah, well, if you look in Theater at Sea, you can see the Grizzly and you can see the assault breacher vehicle.
One is kind of dopey looking, but a bit cute. One is I'm going to murder your entire family.
And yes, that is ARAD on the front of the turret.
God, it's just like, oh my god. Menacing. Aggressively menacing.
And, you know, two
Better
Mic
framing of it,
launchers
photo.
on the back of the turret.
Okay, where did... So let me just make sure that I am where I am, because I should be getting close to actually getting through the questions. Let me have a look. Where are we? Come on, Fleet, engage brain. For what it's worth. Okay, so yep, so we're getting there, we're getting through it. I think we did that. But I will just answer it in case we didn't, because it's related to the obviously coming ramblings anyway. Brandon Larson, how strong are the People's Liberation Army Navy in the Red Fleet timeline? Fundamentally unchanged. Haven't been touched. Because what could they do? Nothing they can really do, to be fair, apart from build what they're building and do what they do historically. And that's where I'm going to leave that quickly. So let me see. Next question. Leslie Mitchell asks, what does the panel think of the Sentaka Show type small high-speed sub? Let me just have a look and see exactly what that is. Oh, it's the class of small attack boats the IGN came up with just prior to the end of the war. I'll just put a link to the Wikipedia article for them in Theatre at Sea so the rest of the panel can have a look. For my personal thought process, I think they're a very unique solution to... Well, they're basically a way to regenerate the IGN submarine capability with a basically pure... with a pure desire to have a very cheap, very effective submarine that literally goes out with 2 torpedoes, with 4 reloads and goes, I'm just going to be around the home islands. I'm not going anywhere else. You're going to come to me and I'm going to torpedo you. Actually capable of 13 knots when submerged. So, not a bad little submarine, actually. Anyone else got any thoughts?
Look in Theater at Sea for moose.
The I-201s could do 20 submerged. Oh my god, really? Damn! Damn!
The Japanese had a lot of very good individual portions of submarine technology. The way they approached the holistic design of a lot of these boats, or the way the operational use of them was just quite flawed. They could have had a much more dangerous submarine fleet if they'd put things together in a better way. Probably the best way to put it. If they had lots of great parts, but what they created was not as greater than the sum of its parts, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Where? Come on, Fleet. Get back to the thing. Get back to the thing. Get back to the thing. Come on, Discord. Work with me. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Admiral Wellesley asks, so what if the Perry expedition antagonized the Dutch in the Dutch East Indies, resulting in a war happening between the US and the Netherlands in 1900 over the Dutch East Indies? Pre-Dutch American
Oh,
Dutch
no.
building program changes. It's basically 10 powerful class cruisers built for the Netherlands, either by Vickers or at home. So let me just check the power. That gives them 10 more armored cruisers, which they desperately need.
In 1900, the Perry expedition you're talking about the 1850s.
That's what the
Why?
question said.
I think
No, so this was a thing that we were talking about last week post Rambling. It was a campfire topic that sort of
Well,
went.
it can't be because it's 1900. It's before Ramblings ended.
Yeah, no. The original intent was that the American didn't stop their expansionist wars after the the Spanish American War. So pretty much this was supposed to be announced of after the Spanish American War. America basically wanted more,
I mean,
and
good
the
luck
only
to them.
thing yeah, I know. Good luck to them. That's basically what we're talking. The entire
Because
rambling, or the entire thing was just we were like, yeah, no, the Americans are going to have a rough time trying to fight the Dutch.
even without the powerful class cruisers, so the Denver class built earlier as copies to or copies of the New Orleans. Oh, okay. So it means the Denvers are replaced with the New Orleans. That gives the U.S. more protected cruisers of a second-class nature, which is better for them. But the Netherlands is not the Spanish. They only have one colonial possession to defend. The Americans are not going to be able to leverage any of their battleships at all.
why
Why
would you
not?
say that?
Yeah, why not?
In 1900, let me just check quickly.
I mean, they have the Philippines they can operate from.
It's basic.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just trying to
Especially if they're deciding they're going to launch a war against the Dutch East Indies at that distance, they're not going to put themselves into that war if they realize they can't actually operate any ships near there. I mean, that's kind of a significant portion of, planning for any kind of conquest, whether it was the Spanish-American War
Yeah.
or any of the prior conflicts the U.S. was in. Like, this is like, you lay the industrial framework and the logistical framework first. Unless you're completely surprised by the war in the way that, for example, the Union was not expecting, obviously the United States was not expecting to fight a full-pitched civil war right before the U.S. Civil War, so it took a while for the North to get its logistics sorted out, but once it did, it was able to operate effectively. But, if the U.S. is the aggressor against the Dutch, frankly, the Dutch just have no real effective means of resisting, because the Americans will just bring their battle fleet over. And it's one thing to say we might have cruisers doing raiding missions, but you have to actually be able to defend the core territories the Americans are attacking at the end of the day. And if you can't directly stand against the battle fleet, you're just done. You can buy
it's going to
yourself.
be it's the Indianas can't come. The Indianas just they're not really suitable. So you're basically talking in 1900. You're talking about Iowa. You're talking about the 2 Kearsarge class battleships, and if she's ready in time, you're talking about Alabama of the Illinois class.
Yes.
So that's 4. The Dutch have 10 powerful first class protected cruisers. Now, these ships can't really stand up in terms of protection to those 4 battleships, but that's still 10 cruisers that can do 22 knots that have a pair of 9.2-inch guns and 12 6-inch guns, plus 16 3-inch guns. In the era that we're talking about, it's going to depend entirely on how it actually shakes out. Basically,
If the U.S.'s goal is to seize these, and they know they're up against that force, they're coming with their battleships.
Oh, absolutely. But no. What I mean is, if the US is stupid and its battleships sort of wade in with very little in the way of screen, they're just going to get jumped by 10 armored cruisers, and they'll be constantly hit.
Fleet, why are you asking a navy to be completely stupid?
I'm. That's not what I was going somewhere with that. You cut me off before I could.
So basically, if the Americans behave exactly the way they need to for the Dutch to win, which the Japanese very famously also kind of planned this out before World War II, I'm just saying this is where it's the echoes of where we're going here.
I mean, you didn't.
I would not bank on this.
I mean,
if
you
it's the
didn't let
Americans
me.
we're dealing with.
You didn't let me finish. I was just running through a series of hypotheticals, not saying which was likely. I was just saying, like, this is one way it could go. It's more likely it could go this way. It could also go this way. Like, these are the ways both sides can, in theory, extract victory from this. But obviously, that's not me saying that's how it's gonna go. This is me saying if X occurs, X will follow. Even then, though, you're still talking about you've got New York and Brooklyn as well knocking around. The US's first two proper armored cruisers as well, so they'll be quite useful. I don't know. The Pennsylvanias don't come in until 1900. Yeah, they're not built till well after this, so the US only has two. Still two additional assets, and if New York, because New York and Brooklyn by themselves are superior to anything.
And something tells me now she's not an armored cruiser. But something tells me in this environment, Olympia is not getting decommissioned.
Oh, absolutely not. No.
And again, she's not an armored cruiser, so that has to factor in.
The thing you've got to bear in mind.
She was deployed to the theater.
The thing you've got to bear in mind is that how a cruiser is protected, whether it's a protected or armored cruiser, doesn't matter so much compared to its capabilities in combat. So, for example, even though Olympia is a protected cruiser, she's still powerful enough that she's very much high-end second class in terms of just general cruising, and she possibly might even enter low-end first class, just in terms of it's those 4 8-inch guns that really weigh in for her.
So you've got potentially 2 U.S. armored cruisers, Olympia, and 4 battleships against 10 armored cruisers.
Yeah. No, 10 first-class cruisers, because the powerfuls are protected, but they are first-class cruisers.
Okay.
So basically,
10 first class.
So
that's not
So you've got 4 battleships for the US, 2 first-class cruisers, and a second-class cruiser, plus whatever the screen for that force is. Versus the powerfuls, with the Dutch only having their rather weak protected cruisers that they have at the time to actually work with them. I am seriously thinking it's gonna be the US's fight to lose, unless they would have to monumentally screw up to not win. I mean, they're probably going to be made to bleed for it, but they'll still win.
And the other thing I'll keep in mind here is if the U.S. is deciding after the Spanish-American War, no, we want more, what's that mean for U.S. naval spending?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's not going to fall off a cliff again.
That's kind of the core, I think, problem with the scenario even, is if you're looking at the Dutch and you're looking at the force they have there, they're probably going to say, okay, we're going to want a little bit more before we tackle this, if this is a significant fighting force the Dutch have present, whether that's more armored cruisers or more ocean-going battleships. When they do turn up, it's going to be with a fleet that they're not really worried about losing, or the risk of losing, because it will have the sufficient margin of overmatch.
Like how many Kearsarges are there? Are there 2 as historical, or have they built 4? Do they round out the Illinois class to 4 ships rather than 3?
Or do the 2 initial armored cruisers end up not being single entity runs?
Or more accurately, do you get a 3rd one-off in the aftermath of the Spanish-American War is more likely? So basically, or do you get a class of 3? Because remember, there's a like you get Brooklyn, and then there's like a 4 year gap between her and the laying down of the Pennsylvanias, which probably won't happen. It is actually it's one of the more interesting hypotheticals we've actually had, because it allows a discussion on actual, how navies aren't really fixed. Things can change based on international relations and how they actually.
Well, it's not even international relations here, because you're changing a fundamental attitude in the United States. And it's the same fundamental attitude that would see the U.S. Navy repeatedly axed in size after every conflict. That is no longer a thing. The moment you take the option, the moment you make the statement, the U.S. decides they want more. The U.S. wants to continue wars of expansion and continue to take European colonies. The moment that becomes the attitude in the U.S., the attitude towards the United States Navy changes overnight by a massive amount.
Yeah, I think we've pretty much done that fairly well. Brandon Larson, what if Franz Ferdinand had never been assassinated? History goes off the rails and goes in a wildly different direction. That's basically all we can say.
Yeah.
At that point, you've changed something so fundamental.
He also had an attitude, even though he disliked the Serbs, he had an attitude that they should be brought up to an equal or near equal status as the Austrians and Hungarians in the Empire.
He wanted a third crown,
and there is no telling what that's going to cause in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. That is such a wild card that you can't predict that. Now, is there going to be a Russo-German war? Almost certainly.
The Germans basically want it.
Because the Germans are of the opinion it's now or it's never against the Russians.
Yeah.
And
that means they're going to fight the French, which means they're going to do the Schlieffen Plan, which means the UK is going to get involved. Though the UK getting involved really isn't dependent on the Schlieffen Plan. Belgium's just a convenient excuse. Whether or not Austria gets involved in whatever hypothetical Great War this is will depend on how it starts. Because the Austrian Empire just about holds together in peacetime. Wartime basically kicks the foundation out from under the structure.
And depending how it starts has some connotations for Italy. And whether or not the Brits get involved also has some connotations for Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a pretty very significant factor in the decision making. So
it basically comes down to how long does Britain wait before it joins the war if Belgium isn't attacked. Because Belgium being attacked gives the British a very easy way to honour the Entente Cordiale. If Belgium isn't attacked, they basically have to wait for a different opportunity, which suits.
That requires Germany to not use the Schlieffen Plan.
Exactly, but like I say, it depends entirely on. Yeah, it depends entirely on how, this whole thing shakes out. Lazy Author asks, it's somewhere in the 1940s. Fleet is controlling Germany.
Oh boy.
Can any Japanese bomber produced during the 1940s reach and bomb Berlin to the ground? So basically, can any bomber the Japanese were working on during the 40s fly?
No.
No.
The B-52 can't fly that distance unrefueled.
Apparently, he's arguing that yes, they can.
No, I'm not. I ain't doing that.
Lazy Offer is arguing.
Just seeing, is there any other questions here? Yeah, Brandon Lawson, what's your favorite cryptid? Favorite cryptid? Hmm.
I'm assuming, like, the question. By the way, that one question implies like from Japan to Germany.
Yes, from Japan to Germany.
Okay, so what's going to be the closest there? Okay.
I mean, to be fair, you could probably try to push Manchuria since it's the 40s, right? If you have to get it a little bit closer.
I'm just going to do from Hokkaido to Berlin here. Okay, no, a B-52 could do it, but then would have to refuel on the way back. So they can't actually carry out a combat mission unrefueled from there. It would require air refueling.
So in that case, then just no. There's no Japanese aircraft from the 40s that can do it.
So yeah, if you're talking one-way missions, but
If you're doing a one-way mission just for the intent of burning Berlin, then
well, I mean, you're not. They don't have the payload to do that,
yeah.
nor do they have the number of bombers.
Mm-hmm.
And now with a B-52H, if you knock a couple hundred miles off of that, like 200 to 300 nautical miles off of that, yeah, a B-52H can do that unrefueled with internal payload.
So it's
Um,
Manchuria most likely.
But this is one of the reasons I kind of look at the Black Buck raid and go, yeah, that was pretty ingenious for having such bad equipment.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. So moving on. Brandon Larson asks, "What is your favorite cryptid?" For me, in terms of cryptids,
Favorite cryptid.
I don't really have one. Not really something I study that often. I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously the Quacken will always be funny because, well, the Quacken. But nothing else really to say apart from that. Are you looking forward to the upcoming War Thunder update, or are you just meh? Honestly, I've been meh about War Thunder for years. I mean, Sidon put it best on the day. I don't really have
I haven't
an
played
opinion.
it in years.
I only play it for game night nowadays. Also, I do have a cautious and
It's basically the FA. It's basically the FA-18 update, and that's about it. There's so little stuff coming to other nations.
Open your wallets, top tier players, basically. Again.
I have no interest in playing anything in War Thunder that is anywhere near that modern. I think it was
really
a
don't think War
huge
Thunder should have
mistake.
went this far.
I think War Thunder should have stopped with like the Chieftain, the M60, the T-72A / maybe B, maybe the 105 Abrams and the like, but I don't think they should have gone any more modern than that. And realistically, I think the most modern in the air is the F4, the MiG-23. They're continued, and the reason they're doing this is because it's the only way they can keep people coming back because their game is so flawed.
Very true.
No, that's not so true. Right. War Thunder's definitely got its flaws, but that's not the only reason players come back to it. Because if that was the case, then War Thunder's player base would be actually quite tiny.
It's
A good
also
number of the people that we have on the community game nights don't come to War Thunder for that. They play War Thunder for we enjoy the mid and low tiers, and we play because we enjoy it.
there are
So saying that
there are a lot of people who like if you're attracting the big whales, then
I mean, look, Gaijin has said it flat out. That's why they feel they need to continue to push that direction.
it's the same reason any game needs to feel like they need to push stuff to try and get those. But on the other hand, the actual percentage of players who are, yes, I must get this top tier vehicle versus I play this game because I enjoy it is quite different.
I mean, that's not what I'm saying, Dragon.
Now that we're
That's
having
kind of what it's. Your point earlier, I'm pretty sure, was they feel they have to do that.
one at a time.
It's an advertising strategy, Dragon, and it's a very well-known one.
But you also said
games.
Quite literally earlier that people wouldn't come back if they weren't doing this, and that's factually false.
No, it was more the fact that Gaijin feels that way. It's not that that's the truth, it's that Gaijin themselves feel that way. It's not true, but that's what Gaijin thinks. Gaijin thinks they have to constantly keep pushing the latest and greatest thing, or pushing further forwards into the future, because it's great advertising. They think it brings people into the game, or brings people back into the game. Whether or not that's true is up to personal interpretation, but that's what Gaijin thinks. That's what Le Snail thinks.
That's what they think.
Jury's out on that one a bit.
I mean,
That's what they think in terms of bringing in new players. Because there's not much they have to do to retain the old players who place the lower tier.
Yeah.
Game's already there. If you enjoy it and you keep coming back because there's either A, no alternative, or B, you just like it that much, then they don't need to do much to, keep you around. It's all about how to bring in more players, and that's how they think they're going to do it, by constantly pushing the end date further and further and further.
Right, so with that, we are now actually done with the catch-up questions. That was fun. That was a fairly decent catch-up ramblings. Not for bad.
More time.
Yeah, done in about an hour and a half. It's very good. Love to see it.
Now, shall we start generating more questions?
Nope.
Yes, please.
Nope. No,
you could do like a half an hour or so while you load up Hoi.
All right. Well, anyway,
Are you trying to do a Hoi game then? I take it.
Oh, it's Friday. It's Friday.
You won't. I can say you won't be getting a good number of players then.
Well, we got a continuation going on.
Of the usual lot.
Why not?
Benno and Sidious are already taken.
There goes two of the people in the.
There's a cell game.
Well, no, Benno and Sidious wasn't in. Or
yeah, right.
Sidious was in the.
Right. Anyway, look, I need to. Right. Thank you everyone on YouTube for watching. Hope you had a fantastic time. Obviously, tune in on Sunday for. It'll probably have to be a recorded Hoi episode rather than a streamed one, owing to the fact that I will be somewhere else on Sunday and will not be able to stream, though I will probably be around for